welcome to Build Series. I'm Laura Muraski with HuffPost. David Gray released his first album in 1993 and went on to receive worldwide critical acclaim some 6 years later with White Ladder, featuring the hit song Babylon. In a career that now spans 25 years, Gray has released 10 albums and received Grammy and Brit Award nominations. And in March, he'll release Gold in a Brass Age, his 11th studio album. Please welcome David Gray, everyone. David, welcome back to Build. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
It's been a minute since we've heard a full length album from you. About 5 years,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been busy though.
You're making me feel bad.
Yeah. Well, I know the fans here and watching online and everywhere else are eager for some new music from you.
Yeah, it's taken a while to get this ready to go, but the record's been in the can for quite a while. I'm really excited about it. It is a new start. There's a sort of regenerated, creative energy that's sort of happened in the last 5 years. I've been really, really busy in the studio and enjoying it so much. So it's good to watch the video. It's the first time I've actually seen it, apart from not on my own computer screen.
Yeah, so what was your reaction? You were bopping along while we were sitting here.
I think I should really be appearing in silhouette from now on. Like, I could be the first two-dimensional artist. I love the video. The guy, Eric Dyer, did the animations, the zoetrope animations that we used behind. Yeah, I think it came out great.
Yeah, it sounds like you were pretty involved in the whole process. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the creative process behind a video like this?
Yeah, I think this song sort of fell out of the skies. It was one of the ones on the record that I'd sort of been wanting to write something. I had all these images, and the image that the idea that started the song was like looking at a drop of rain into a puddle or onto a pond and seeing the sort of concentric circles going out. And then I was sort of in the park, and they were cutting down trees, and I could see all the rings. And then an acorn fell, and I just thought, yeah, I guess that's the expansion going out, just like a drop of water over a longer period of time. So I started a thought process like that, and I started to write down ideas. And then eventually this crystallized into the song. And then when we were discussing how we were going to present the song as a video, I just said I can't get past the idea of sort of time lapse, because the song itself is a kind of time lapse song. It starts with saying lying down in the grass and watching an acorn start to turn into a tree. So we started from that, and then we thought, well, that's a bit passé, really, just the time lapse thing. So someone said, well, what about zoetropes, which is a different kind of animation? So I just started Googling it, and I found Eric Dyer's work that we ended up using for the video, which is absolutely amazing. Some of it is absolutely incredible. So we just fired him off an email, and it ended up he was a big fan. So it was like, come on, Eric. And so he did these bespoke sort of animations for us, and then we projected them on a massive screen out in the woods. And I became the silhouetted version of myself. I'm quite proud of my moves there. They're looking good. They hold up well.
That's a great story, how that all came together. That's awesome. Would you say that the rest of the album, the writing process at least, was similar to the way the Sapling came about, that song?
Yeah. I've been trying to do things a bit differently for lots of different reasons. I think because you can get bored. And the last record I released, Mutineers, I was starting to push back out into sound and looking at my process of how I was writing, what I was writing about, and what was possible in a song, where a song could start, where you can take it. So expanding those ideas, and I took those opportunities further on this record. So it was very free and very creative, and very much about finding the right person to make the record with. So once Ben DeVries slotted into place, who's my producer, he could translate my ideas into reality, and we just had great fun. So it was very, very spontaneous and very sort of joyous, unself-conscious. I generally started just with nothing, pretty much. Like, I just have a couple of lines written down. I'd sort of feel that there was a cadence to the words that made the melody want to work, or the rhythm of those words come out a certain way. I'd look for a few chords to pin underneath it, and we just start from there. Then wherever we felt the rhythm was, we'd add that and sort of build. But a process that it disabled my sense of taste, And I was just able to work without thinking or worrying too much about whether it was any good or not. And that was a question for later on. The answer we're about to receive when we release the damn thing.
Well, so far so good. Do you get worried about that? You know, the reaction from fans and critics alike?
Of course, yeah. It's never an easy thing to do. It's just it's like when you make paintings and you hang them on the wall and you wait for everyone to turn up and see what they're going to think. So it's you know, you don't know what the reaction's going to be. You're in your own little bubble to a certain extent. You want that connection. Life is so much richer if the music connects with somebody else. So when I get to a certain point in the studio writing a song and singing it and recording it, there's a certain point when it's starting to work and I'm imagining an audience. I'm in the vocal booth, but my eyes closed. I'm imagining I'm on stage. It's just basically like the child with the tennis racket in front of the mirror. That you still same principle still.
Do you, 11 albums, you're obviously a very prolific writer. I know we said 5 years, but you've been writing and touring throughout this whole time. Writer's block, is that something that David Gray ever gets?
I, touch wood, haven't had that yet, but that's part of why I've changed my process. I think if I just tried to write songs in a more traditional way, as narratives, as stories that apparently are sprung from my own experience or have an autobiographical element to them, I think then I do find those kind of, occasionally someone will say, can you write a song for something? Mm-hmm. And then I find I get hung up on, why is this important? Is this any good? What have I experienced in the last few years that would justify this song? Or I find all those negative processes come in, and that's where it begins. That's where you start grinding to a halt, if you start questioning everything you're doing. So I find that by changing my process, it's as much to do with escaping that self-consciousness as anything else. I love the freedom. I'm just like a child playing with sound and words in a sort of sandpit. There's a sort of joyous, creative freedom to it that's very untroubled by a value. It's just instinctive. So the value comes later when you start to sort of look at it and analyze it and wonder whether it's any good and what you need to do to it to finish it. But I haven't struggled with that. In fact, in my current sort of mode, all I can see is more possibilities for how I can push my ideas further and further out. I think I'm just getting started. I'm onto a sort of second wave. Sometimes it's hard to know where you're going to go next. Yeah. You know, like in the wake of White Ladder, that was a sort of an awkward moment of it became a bit too much in the head and not enough in the heart. But now I'm just making songs really straight from the heart again. And all I can see is creative possibilities opening up in all kinds of directions. There's almost not enough time in the day.
Oh my gosh, I love to hear that, because it's like, I love the second phase in a way, and the creative process behind what you create. I know that this was sort of taken from, like, you described it like a cut and paste sort of vibe. What does that mean in terms of making music?
Yeah, I think what I meant with that was I used to sort of sit down and try and write songs, so in a more traditional way. Verse, chorus, verse, whatever. But these days I just take notes all the time. It could be conversations on the bus. Mm-hmm. It could be just something I've seen written on a billboard. It could be anything, or it could be a line from a book that I'm reading or something I hear on the TV. I'll write it down. I might add a few of my own thoughts to it. And then, like a sort of magpie, I'll kind of, in the creative moment, once I've got something crystallizing around an idea, I'll just sift through all this stuff. I'll write it out, and I'll just start taking images and putting them together. So there's a sort of cut and paste element to that. But also in terms of the music itself. So if I were to record on this record, if I were to record a guitar part or a piano part, I very much made the cut, the edit, as a part of the aesthetic. So if you were to go along for a minute with a sort of authentic performance of voice and guitar, and then suddenly make a great big cut and cut to something completely different, everyone would go, well, that's a bit weird. But if you make edits all the time, it becomes a part of the rhythm, the sort of glitchiness of the sound. So just looking for something different, so that whatever I'm doing comes back to me in a slightly different way. So chopping up my guitar parts, piano, vocals, messing with the vocals, anything that just turns it on its head and yeah, it feels like a space that you haven't walked into before, as opposed to the same old thing.
Yeah. I know we heard the lead single on this record, but is there a song on the album that really speaks to what you want to say, or say, okay, this really sums up this record, or is my favorite track?
I don't know if I've got a favorite track, but I think the title track
Yeah.
is one that, a bit like I described Sapling, coming once I'd had the ideas, sort of, I've been ruminating for a long time about the ideas of the images in that song. But when the song finally arrived, it crystallized at alarming speed, just a couple of hours. The whole thing just came pouring out and suddenly was constructed. Well, with Gold and the Brass Age, the process was, we were working on something completely different. And my producer I went off to make a cup of tea or something, and he just started looping a few bits of the guitaring that I'd just been putting into the computer, but just for fun, really, and then messing with the sound, and it made this funny little bendy, glitchy little loop. And I just came in and I said, that is brilliant, forget the song, let's just concentrate on this, let's start there. And I just started to play a little ascending chord sequence up through that, and then the words just came pouring out. So I think when something just seems to strike right to the heart, and the song comes out, there's something special going on. So that song, I will stand by it. I've sung it an awful lot already,
Yeah.
and it feels like one that's going to last.
All right, I know, and you're going on tour.
Yeah.
And you have, when you go on tour, you're going on tour next year, and you're coming back to the States, I think, in the spring and the summer. What's it like to put together a set list now, 11 albums in?
Yeah, interesting. I think each tour, each like the mood I'm in almost at this point. Certain songs seem like appropriate to slot into it. So maybe I'll look for ones that I haven't done in a while that feel right. And so, yeah, there's obviously some songs like Babylon, Sail Away, that, you know, they never go away. People want to hear them. They'll find a place on the set list, most likely.
Yeah.
And but then I get to pick from the rest. So that's fun, really. I do try and reinvent things, and because this record's more sort of electronic, on previous tour I had 7 people on stage trying to create the music without using computers or without using anything on tape or on hard drive. This time I feel the opposite, because it was very much an electronic studio record, which was me layering stuff over the top of my... So I'm going to be looping things on stage. We've got a sampler on stage and a computer on stage. It's very much about pushing that to the front. And because that was sort of electronic approach was very much a part of White Ladder, songs like Please Forgive Me, Babylon even, I feel that bringing the electronics back out of those songs will be how to go about this tour. So I'll go back almost to the art. Well, I am going back into the master tapes to take the sound, to put it into the sampler, so that whatever versions we do of those old songs will have the original sounds in them. So they'll have more of the electronic thing going on. So that's one vibe that's definitely going to happen this time.
That's cool. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you say old songs, but I guess they are older for you these days. You put out 3-4 albums prior to releasing White Ladder, and really making it big with Babylon, etc. Were you prepared for that kind of reaction, fame at that time?
No. It was a wonderful thing that happened, but it didn't happen sort of overnight. Even when it did happen, we had success with White Ladder in Ireland first, phenomenal success. And from the springboard of that, the record came out in the States and it came out in the UK, and things really started to happen in the year 2000, really. But it took a lot of hard work to get there. It didn't just, the single came out and that was it. We just couldn't stop smiling. I mean, we would just laugh and smile and get drunk all the time. We were so happy.
Yeah.
After years of struggling away, playing like really bleak tours and struggling to get any real attention, suddenly things came good, and it was just an amazing feeling. So I don't think anything prepares you for fame itself. That's a strange world that you've got to navigate your way through in whatever way fits for you. It was something that I think as soon as it gripped me, I realized I didn't really want that bit. I was in the supermarket I was queuing at the deli counter, and I was suddenly surrounded by people. I was trying to say the words prosciutto and some mixed olives, but it never came out. I never got to place my order. I was just completely thronged by people, and that was when Babylon was a sort of hit. And I was basically on tour the whole time, so I was hardly back in London enough to realise what was going on. But that was one where I just had to leave the supermarket and all the shopping, because it was like, hey, it's David Gray, and it was like, what the hell? Yeah. I had about 50 people around me. It was nuts.
I was going to ask you, like, if there was a moment where you felt like, okay, I made it. This is the moment.
There was a few. There was one wonderful moment when, as I say, we were working so hard. We were basically just gigging and touring all the time. And we'd been booked to play a festival in Scotland. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Scotland, but it's like they're mad for it over there. It's cold. It rains all the time. They know how to have a good time. And we were the first band on of the whole festival, so the doors opened on a Friday morning, and we were on at like 12:30 in the afternoon on the main stage. They'd moved us onto the main stage because by this point the music was kicking off, and we had no idea what to expect. And literally, we walked out on the stage, and the gates had opened. It was like that Mel Gibson film, Braveheart. They were sort of streaming towards us, and I thought that there was a big beer tent next to the main stage. I thought that's where they were going. But they were actually coming to see us, and there was like thousands of them, and suddenly there were like 10,000, and we started the first song, and all these people were singing Sail Away. Sort of, I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is the dream. It's the fairy tale. This is actually as you imagine it's supposed to be. This is crazy. So that moment was one of many. Being on stage at Glastonbury with the sun going down, that was something else too.
The way you describe that, I can just envision what that room was like that day. That's pretty crazy. I mean, at the same time, I feel like you're still very appreciative of that time and what it's done for you, and what you're able to still continue your career today in such a prolific way.
Yeah, well, I am. It was an incredible thing that happened to me. And although it's a struggle sometimes to factor all that in, I've had some time now and some perspective on everything that's happened. I do feel it was a wonderful, enriching thing that's given me an incredible life and an incredible opportunity, really, to sing my songs to people. It's so much nicer to sing them to people rather than empty rooms. It's like barbecue sold out, David Gray, 9 o'clock. That's what it was like 6 months before White Ladder. So I'm a very lucky person, I get to pour my heart and soul into making something, and then I get to take it out and make videos, get new clothes, and go on stage. Skinny is over, by the way. That's one thing I say. I've gone wide in the leg. I'm in New York to say I have got a new album out, but skinny is over is my message.
You're very on trend. You got to be on trend in New York City, that's for sure. You say the heart and soul that you speak to, I think, is part of the reason why fans connect with your music so much over all these years. When you look back at growing up, do you have a memory where this was one of your first musical memories, whether it was singing or writing or performing music?
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a band I was obsessed with, Madness. I've still got the haircut. They weren't so big over here, but we had this sort of, after punk, things kind of went crazy for a while, and just new ideas just kept coming up. And one really unexpected one was at about 1979-80. There was this massive ska explosion, and you had the Specials, Madness, The Beat, all these bands. But Madness were kind of just a bunch of London boys, complete nutters, having the whale of a time. And I remember seeing them on Top of the Pops, and I sort of fell in love, basically. They were playing Night Boat to Cairo. So that was a big moment of musical connection. There were obviously more serious ones later down the line when I, first heard Bob Dylan or whatever, which really sort of blew me away. Or Van Morrison, really getting into him in a big way, or Talk or something. But yeah, that Madness one. I know those guys now. They are completely mad too.
That's funny how it all comes full circle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you weren't doing music, what do you think you'd be doing?
I think I'd be doing painting.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't doing that, I'd be struggling. I think I'm unemployable at this point. I don't think there's anything I could do, really. I couldn't do a job. I couldn't work for anyone. I couldn't listen to orders or instructions. So it would be painting, and if it wasn't that, then I don't know. I don't know what else. Maybe a milkman. This feels like that scene in Spinal Tap when he's saying, I could work in a shoe shop. So, yeah.
What's something that you haven't done yet that you're like, you know what, I'm still destined to do? Because like you said, your creative energy is still thriving, and even more so today.
Yeah, something I haven't done. Well, there's lots of countries I haven't gone.
Yeah.
And South America, I've never been. Mexico, I've never been. I've never really played in Asia. So I think, on the last record, the best of compilation, I took a solo show round, and it's that much easier, obviously, to just me and the guitar turn up in places. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be doing that. It's going to be a world tour. I want that I want that poster. I want the T-shirt where it's got all the countries on it, like sort of AC/DC, 1983, sort of vibe with South Korea,
Yes.
Japan, Australia, Mexico, Argentina, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd love to go to some of those places and play for those fans. I think before streaming, it was hard to know whether anyone was listening to your music in those places, because traditional record buying wasn't their strong point. Even in countries like Spain, you never really knew if anyone was buying the records, because there was a lot of pirated music or whatever. But now you can see people streaming stuff. You can actually get a read on what's going on. So there's a big spike in Santiago, Chile. I'm definitely going to be going there.
Nice. Well, yeah, that's amazing. Like from when you started out in the mid '90s to now. I mean, the data that we have, the information that we have, is so astronomically different than when you got your start. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy, absolutely crazy. And that's one of the real positive things. Is I love it when you can see unexpected places or unexpected songs doing well. Some songs of mine that I didn't really think would clock many listens up, and for some reason someone's put them on a playlist. I don't know what's happened, and they're clocking up millions of listens, which is great. I like that aspect of it. I think all these technologies are so much more exciting when they're sort of emergent. I think once they're well established and they become the only game in town, they're policed by the powers that be in predictable ways, and it becomes the same old thing. It's like, how do you get on that playlist? And the competition becomes incredibly intense for those few spaces. So, but certainly as it's in this dawning era, it's been a really exciting thing to watch.
Yep. Yeah, and this will be streaming soon in March and available for purchase then. Before we let you go, we have some questions from the crowd here. So, let's get to it. Who's first? Right here.
Hi, David. How's it going? I'm curious about the album title, Gold in the Brass Age, and you were talking about, cut and copy, cut and paste things from life. Is that like a saying that you had heard one time, or something that happened? It sounds like an old saying, but I'm not familiar with it. So
no, I'm not familiar with it either. I read it in a story, and I'd written it down, but I didn't write down which story. I had a feeling it was Raymond Carver, and I was right. It was. It's a story called Blackbird Pie. But actually, when I wrote it, when I suddenly said Gold in the Brass Age, my producer said, "What's this song called?" And I said, "Gold in the Brass Age." I don't know why. It just popped into my head. And he said, "Oh, what's that from?" And I said, "It's from a Raymond Carver poem." So I'd completely misremembered it. But I found the story now. Yeah, I think what Raymond Carver's sort of saying is just... it's self-explanatory. Something wonderful and unexpected and vital in a world of sort of shrunken horizons. I think something of value in a world that doesn't value things. So that's the kind of context he gives it in the story. So yeah, that's an example of my magpie approach. If I read a couple of lines in something, newspaper or a book, I just write them down, and if it makes me think of something, I'll put following lines of my own and might start a rhyming couplet scheme. And then when I go through these things, I've rarely put down where I got it from. So that's my excuse from my legal perspective, in case anyone's going to sort of do me for plagiarism. Just thought I'd get that in there.
Thank you for that question. All right, who's next?
Hi.
Back there.
So my question is, who would be your dream collaboration, either dead or alive, any musician from time?
Yeah, well, if I could sing with Nina Simone, I think that would be incredible. But she was kind of scary, so I think I might need a plan B if I could. I'd love to do a song with Robert Smith from The Cure. I probably weren't expecting me to say that, but I was a massive Cure fan when I was growing up. I think he's amazing, and there's just something about his musicality and the fact that whenever he sings a song, he always sort of means it. There's something about him anyway that really floats my boat. I'd love to make some music with him.
Very cool. Thank you. We have time for one last question right here.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. You mentioned Raymond Carver, who I'm also a really big fan of. So I was just wondering who some of your artistic influences are, either in music or in another medium.
Yeah, well, I do read a lot. So I'm reading quite a lot of poetry at the moment. I don't always, but I've got a big stack of that. So Raymond Carver I love. He's like one of my default people. If I'm on tour and I don't know what book to read, I haven't brought one with me or whatever, I'm not a Kindle kind of person yet. I'll read short stories. So I'll read Raymond Carver or Alice Munro, who's amazing. Things like that, where you can just you can take a little bite-sized chunk of literature rather than Dostoevsky or something. It's like that makes you feel tired when you look at the 750 pages of very small type. So those kind of things, and reading a lot of poetry, as I say. I really like compilation books of poetry if they're good, because there'll always be people in there that I don't know their stuff, and it'll cause me to investigate, particularly writers in other languages. So, Thomas Tranströmer is this Swedish poet who's very famous there, but not so well known everywhere else. I love his stuff. I love lots of Norwegian literature, so I've branched out in those directions. So it's always I feel my way in a very sort of word of mouth, kind of from one thing to another. If I'm reading a writer and in the introduction it mentions another writer that I don't know about, I'll investigate that. And I've never, for example, if Spotify were to suggest to me what I want to listen to, I would never do it, because I'm kind of weird like that. And if a computer suggests anything to me, I would never ever do what they're suggesting. I will only ever follow my own thing, which is probably totally deluded, because they might be shortcutting me to the thing I'm going to find out anyway. But that's the way I am, and I think it's to do with the quiet way that I discover things is to do with where I grew up, where there was no radio signal in our village, and you couldn't really listen to the radio. I lived right at the bottom of the village, and the TV reception was absolutely abysmal. So the way that I found out about music was talking to people who were older and saying, I really like this, and they were like that, and they've wondered, have you ever heard Lou Reed? And I was like, no, I haven't heard Lou Reed. Well, I'll come back to my house and I'll play you, Velvet Underground record. And that's sort of how I've always, and same with literature, just talking to people about what I'm interested in, and I'll say, have you ever read this? And it goes on. So that's how I sort of glue my world together. But it's a lot of reading. I don't do so much listening, I got to admit. Now I'm old. I don't know why. I occasionally have a sort of splurge on Spotify or something where, if I discover a new artist, I just start going through all their work and going through all their albums, seeing what they were like when they were, 10 years ago or whatever. So.
Thanks for that question. And thanks for that great answer. We got a little background about your history and music.
Very long answer.
No, I love it.
Completely deviated from the question.
That's great. Thanks for all those questions. David, thank you so much for coming by today.
Thank you.
The album is out March 8th. You can catch David Gray on tour. Let's hear it one more time for David Gray, everyone.
Thank you.